Welcome to another illuminating lecture by Dr. Thor. What we want to cover here is a very important understanding of occult consciousness. This seems to be a huge misunderstanding of how actually your mind, brain, and consciousness works. And these are three different areas that really need to be understood by the occult scientists. There's too many simplistic thoughts about this and misinformation, like everything else in the world, as I always say, because it is true. Anytime you do any kind of research, you find out what ridiculousness that you think you have been told or what is common knowledge really is just common nonsense. I've yet to investigate anything that I have not been shockingly surprised how much is all been common misinformation. Now, there are three elements in the occult scientists' understanding of occult functioning and occult consciousness. And consciousness is very important because it takes things past the commonness. You have and I've talked about these briefly before, but you have the commonness of the brain. Now, the brain is there to control basic functionings: breathing, blood flow, keeping your heart going, all these kind of automatic systems that the brain is there to keep going. Then there is your mind. Your mind is the sixth sense, and I don't mean that in the common understanding of sixth sense, meaning extrasensory perception. No, it is a sense. Your mind senses something. It takes in information, whether it's your hearing, your touch, all the other senses, and then talks to you about it, makes you make judgments and reactions from it. Your mind is what tells you if you put your hand in a fire to pull it out, not your actual senses. Your senses go in there and say, "I'm burning up." Your mind sent signals. Boom, you must pull your hand out of the fire, etc. So your mind is doing that. Your mind is basically a giant computer memory system, a giant filing cabinets with all sorts of information just kind of stuffed in there. It's very similar in this day and age, you would say, to an open computer line. And if you've ever been on any computer line where you went and downloaded something or hit a site where they hit you with 50,000 different ads, one after the other. Sometimes when you get on sites where you get hit by tens, 20, 30, it just keep going on and on and on, where you're just hit one time after another, or even that you're probably it's a computer malfunction at that point where it's just hitting you over and over and over again with a particular ad and infinitum until you actually have to physically stop it by whatever means is necessary in your computer system. Sometimes even just turning the computer off because you have to stop it. That's what the mind does. There's nothing logical about the mind. The mind doesn't have any intelligence. It's a reactive force. So it knows after it's burnt the first time that you got to stay away from fire. Your mind is telling you that. And that's one of the obviously good responses. But the mind can also tell you that fire is bad in general and stay away from it, or you were burnt once. So that means you don't want to ever get near fire. You don't want to light a match. You don't want to get near a stove that has open flame on it. So all these things, the mind can go a little awry and start telling you all this. And that's just an example of one of the many things. The mind is conditioned by all sorts of responses and what happens to it. And it goes into this memory bank and is hit by 1,000 million other memories you have in there of absolutely everything. And it starts making judgments for you, not in an analytical way, not in an intellectual way, but in a reactive way. So it's reacting. And if somebody pushes your button, is an old saying. that something triggers you. It's your mind telling you, well, I hate that. I'm going to be all freaked out by it and attack and be angry. And it goes in your mind and it goes around and around and you can't get it out sometimes. It's very common for a lot of people to not be able to stop thoughts consistently. And this can go to the extreme where you become mentally deranged from it, where you're constantly fed information, even of a negative source. I mean, you can go to the extent of people that have really perverse attitudes. People have compulsions. The mind is telling you to do this for some bizarre reason. And of course, this is the mind is controlled by so many outside forces and inside forces as well. So your mind is basically something that is completely and totally out of control. And the first thing that we always recommend people as we talk to beginners is you have to control your own mind, because the mind is the depowerer. The mind is the blocker. The mind is what you have to get through. The mind is a wall you have to take down. The mind's purposes of what it's supposed to do is far, far weaker than its destructive capacity. I mean, the mind really is just one little step above the brain. And in many ways, the mind is extremely toxic and extremely dangerous, particularly the uncontrolled mind. Everything that you do is a compulsion. I feel sad, I want to eat. Fat people that eat all the time because of some sort of problems are doing it. I mean, once you get a certain amount of overweight, you're committing suicide. Your mind is telling you to do that because you want to fulfill a primitive thing that the mind enjoys. The mind wants to produce chemicals to feed the other things that are in that mind that are controlling you. So not only the mind is this giant big bag of shit, basically, that has been added to for every second of your existence, and previous existence and future existence. I mean, all these things come into the fact of what's affecting your mind. And in the occult sciences, this is unlimited because information is coming to you. And of course, the mind is blocking all this. The mind is blocking your inner magical being. Your mind is blocking your occult power centers. All of these things are conditioned in, programmed in the mind, not only from all your experiences in life, but from actual implants that are in there from negative entities, which have actually have planted these things in your mind to control it and actually make you their slave. Now, a lot of this is shocking to people, but it's the reason why everything happens in the way it does. I mean, basic human behavior is suicidal and makes absolutely no sense at all. There's no reason for humans to do anything that they really do because it's pretty much entirely self-destructive. Humans are horribly easily addicted. And there are numerous addictions out there. People think of drugs when you're addicted, alcohol, etc. Yeah, these are the crude things. But people are addicted to everything, from praying to exercise to collecting. You name it, people are addicted to it. And the mind tells you, because the mind is so bored, that it wants this addiction all the time. Because this addiction, regardless of what it is, gets the mind high. It produces chemicals to feed the mind, which is then, in a sense, and not in a sense, is directly feeding the negative parasitical nature of what is in your mind and there to begin with. What's been planted there are organisms that control you. And this is not only an occult science understanding, it is a biological fact. It's hard to cover everything here, so we're going to cover the general subject matter here today. We'll go into all of that, because that in itself is an interesting and proven area of scientific research now that we will go into in a separate lecture. But you have to control these. Part of controlling these is, first of all, is getting actively involved in there and start getting in there and getting your consciousness. Your consciousness is your higher self that knows what's right, wants to do what's right, but needs to be empowered to act. It is your inner magical being. It is your occult power centers. But these are not opened naturally. You have to open these yourself through certain practices and the use of certain occult science tools. And this is what activates all those centers and empowers you on every single level. It is not done through the mind. So, you really have to understand that your mind is your enemy. Your brain is nothing but a dumb slave that's doing there, pounding away at rocks every day, doing what it's supposed to do. Your mind is a out-of-control maniac that basically is self-destructive. And it wants to jump off the bridge and it wants to take you with it. And what stops you from doing that is not mental thoughts of intelligence. Oh, well, this doesn't make sense. Why would I possibly do that? What stops you is your consciousness that tells you not to do that. And of course, there's the basic levels where your consciousness is fighting your mind all the time. And that's a very base level of operating. And that's what people do all the time. Then people give in when they do things that are very negative or problematical, whether they be illegal or perverse or whatever. But some of these thoughts just overwhelm people. And it's not the brain doing it. Your consciousness is not telling you that. The mind is out of control. So if you're doing something really negative, such as self-destructive, you're a pyromaniac, you're a child molester, whatever it is, you torture animals in extremes, whatever you're doing is not your consciousness is not telling. Your consciousness is fighting against that. As a matter of fact, anybody who's ever been questioned on these things, regardless of their criminal behavior, all know it's wrong. Well, where does that come from? They're not really sociopaths. They know their consciousness is telling them wrong, and their mind is overriding that because the mind not only is out of control, toxic, little sick, perverse energy that it is, it's also programmed and being told to do things to self-destruct the host that it's in. So these complicated factors is a reason why there isn't, quote, super beings and superpowers on this earth, is because these are programmed into you to depower you. The normal flow of human evolution and the way it was in ancient times in the great societies is that people were psychically empowered to extreme states. They had what we would consider today as super abilities. Now, through the infection of the human race and the manufacture of what we consider Homo sapiens, and the very complicated subject that is of where human beings came from, it certainly isn't all those simplistic nonsense you've heard about and biblical gobbledygook. It certainly isn't the scientific gobbledygook either. There used to be talked of quite often the missing link between what's considered primitive species, which really are not even man as we know them today. Mankind, or Homo sapiens, is a particular species of, quote, monkey that has evolved, which nobody really knows where they came from, which is very suspicious in itself. But the whole history of the planet is not linear like we all think it is. This happened, this happened, this happened. Just not true. And of course, again, that's too much to cover in one lecture. We'll be here all day. I will get back to those types of things in different lectures. But the fact is, your consciousness is telling you what's going on, and everybody knows what's wrong or right. It doesn't matter how hideous or what they've ever done. No matter what it is, and even the people who claim to have great philosophical beliefs in any particular area have covered up whatever they've done. They haven't come out and said, well, I did this and I'm happy to do it. And this goes with the annihilation of mass genocides of people and everything else. Nobody has sit there and said, well, I got rid of them because they were scum people and so forth. They all hid the fact that they did it because they all knew what they were doing was wrong. And this goes on every single level. Mass murderers, from Ted Bundy, who murdered and tortured women, to all the other ones, all will say that what they did was wrong, and they were compulsively doing it. What it should be called is mindly controlled doing it. This is why it's so important, and why we stress the foundations and the core abilities. And if you don't get control of your own mind, don't do that immediately through using the Tibetan mind power system and use psychic sexual command techniques to start programming, start telling your mind what to do. You start becoming the general instead of being the private, and letting your mind be the general, because that's what's happening right now. Your mind's the general and it's ordering you around, and you're doing what it's telling you when it should be the opposite. So it's very critical that you do those. And those are the best practices out there. They're relatively simplistic. Well, they basically are simplistic. Most core abilities are very simplistic, and that which makes them the hardest, because the most difficult thing to do is do simple things to control. And the mind hates them. God, this is boring. I don't want to do it. Let's go on. Jump here. Oh, there's something over there. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, that's on TV. So I want junk food. This is what your mind is doing at billionths of a second all the time. So, and that certainly is not positive for you. You need to slow down that mind, but you need to put a collar on it and a leash and take it under control. And this can only be done by developing core abilities, by controlling that mind. And the consciousness really should be seeing them. The consciousness sees the mind from the outside, as if you were looking on yourself. And as if you cut open your head, basically, and you see the brain there. Well, that's just the physicalness. The mind is within there, serving this function, controlled by physical parasites, by occult parasites, by extraterrestrial parasites, and conditioned through your own personal responses, which have been intermixed with all this and actually cause you to do negative things. So this is very ultimately, when we get more into discussion of that, it's mind-blowing to understand this fact. But again, like everything in the occult sciences, it's rooted in scientific fact. So this isn't some sort of metaphysical, New Age, crystal-holding, mumbo-jumbo nonsense. This is based in what we know now and extrapolated on by people of higher consciousness that understand what's really going on, not some sort of delusional scientific type, which really ultimately all get to a point of total confusion because nothing really makes sense, because they find out exactly what I'm telling you. And what I've found out is that nothing makes sense when you start looking at it in depth and you find out actually all the lies and deception that's there. But there's a total bigger picture here to it all. And the point is that you need to control that. It's your occult consciousness that does everything. It's the occult consciousness that once liberated, and once that wall of the mind is broken down, it can then be released and empower all these higher states of functioning which you were meant to have to begin with. The original creation, so to speak, of the human being, particularly the human soul consciousness, or the soul force, as I always like to call it, because it is actually a force. It's an energy. It's a powerful energy that is kept in an extremely advanced cage of containment so that it doesn't get out. And that's what all these things. People are always looking in the past to say, well, this was done, and they find this grimoire, that grimoire. And grimoires are fascinating and fun. I find them mostly really fun. There's really very little when you get into these. And the old terminology, what they meant from all those, what the sigils that they created really mean, other than their crude pictures they show you, and their, adding of Hebrew script and funny little pictures here and there. certainly in themselves of little to no power until it has directly, it has a purpose, like the sigils that we design, the guild designs. Um, it has a purpose of activating energy fields and connecting you to energy fields, as we always stress here. It connects you to a stream of empowerment, and that's how these things work. And that's very, very important to understand. It's not some, oh, I found this grimoire. And of course, if you're a classical occultist, this is what you strive for. I mean, this is really what has been big revival that happened in the 80s when all this kind of happened, and we were the first ones to ever publish all the classic grimoires and collect all these limited grimoires that were out there and then present them to the public in our own editions. All these things that we gathered up in the ancient books that we translated for the first time ever, like the Red Dragon and the Black Dragon, and several others. All are interesting, but if you've been following my lectures, you find out how confusing ancient texts are and how difficult they are to actually translate and understand the consciousness, the meaning of them in ancient times and translating that to modern times. Because people thought a lot different. Each culture thinks a lot different. And anybody who's ever studied any languages understands how differently one culture actually thinks than the other from the structure of their sentences. Where English is very straightforward and very precise, other languages are not. So the point is trying to interpret that into modern times and using it. And the other big conundrum, the big question is that, all these people and cultures that have produced these have not been very successful. So it's really hard to give a lot of this Middle Eastern Jewish magic much credence. It's fascinating. Of course, we have all this written because, the Jews were all by themselves for thousands of years, and they had this... they had to group together under a religious format to survive. The same way, the reason why they tend to be wealthier and more is because they're more educated, because they were isolated. They had no other distractions to a large extent, and this is what they did. And studying all these complicated religious papers is, and then moving on to become a doctor or a lawyer is child play to them because they're used to studying all the time anyway. And memorizing and all the things that go with that. But inherently, they're a race of people who have been murdered by everybody on the planet and have been destroyed by one culture after another. So their magic didn't work too good. The same goes with the Druids. The Romans virtually annihilated every single... And there's no Druidic traditions left anymore because the Romans killed everybody and destroyed everything. It was a pieced together goofballness that comes out of the Druidic tradition of today. There is no such thing. So the point is what does it mean with these basic empowerments here? So when you get into all those things, constantly going back and looking at old cultures that did this or that is nonsense, because there's virtually nothing that you can obtain from vulgar written material. Now the key is to hook up into their stream of consciousness so that you can then channel that into your own life and figure out what was there and how you can empower yourself. But that goes into another area as well. So we want to get back to the basic concept here. There's the brain, which, as you said, is the automatic robot slave that just does its job. There's the confused sense of thinking, or the mind, which is not doing anything but is completely out of control. It's not using, quote, intellectual capacities to make judgments. It's using conditioned responses. It's your consciousness that goes in. Your brain, if something happens, is going to freak out and, oh, it's dangerous. Your brain's going to say, and your brain's just going to react to what the mind does, somewhat pumping chemicals there to support the state the mind has created. Your consciousness is going to say, hey, look, calm down. You have to go here, do this, be careful, don't go over there. This is what your consciousness now kicks in. Your consciousness starts to direct you of what to do in that situation. If you don't empower the consciousness, your mind's going to take over. And this is why people will act in a violent way. They will act in an upset way. This is how fear is generated. Fear is not a consciousness state. And neither is any of these high levels of anger or anything. It is a mental or mind-created state, which is then assisted by the brain producing physical chemicals to support that state. And unless your consciousness comes in and says, whoa, that ain't going to be the way it happens. And in most cases, this stuff is self-destructive. So what you want to develop is being able to turn your consciousness in control, like I've said. Your consciousness starts telling the mind. And once you get past that stage, and it is not easy, as we've stated in our Core Abilities Foundation, to do, and this is why we design so many sigils now to get these energies growing. So you have to understand that. And of course, sigils are not going to instantly do anything for you. It's a process. Nothing instantly happens. Everybody wants that, and we strive to get things done as fast and as powerful as possible. But giving people instant empowerments, instant control over everything in their life, generally upsets them. There's the old cliche, power corrupts and power corrupts absolutely, is a lot of truth to that. If you haven't grown and experienced things and worked towards a particular empowered goal, then you're going to react as a megalomaniac that is empowered to just do your will, which is balanced to nothing because you just learned how to empower all the crap that the mind is telling you instead of growing through your consciousness from your higher self into higher wisdom. So our training is based, and there are different levels of doing this and different techniques as well that are pretty much all the advanced techniques are in the inner guild, but there's lots of basic techniques we are releasing to apprentices and to the general public as well of how to do these things. And this is not the audio discussion for that either. But you've got to understand that if you want to become a higher empowered person, you have to start working from your higher consciousness and releasing those energies. Those occult power centers need to be opened. The inner magical being needs to be activated. These start to tell you, well, I should try this, I should use this, I should do this. And in life, what you want to get down to is not reacting to fixing problems, as I always say. You want to react to empowering your life to make it better. If you're constantly putting out fires, it's kind of stupid, which means your mind is creating all these problems, which is causing you to run around in circles. And then your consciousness is coming in, putting out all these fires, but you're running around in circles just to do that. You're not getting anywhere. That's not how you want to operate. If you operate from your higher consciousness, you'll have less and less problems in life, and you will then be able to build on what you want in life to build that better and more successful life so you have less problems. And you do that by activating that consciousness. That consciousness will make decisions for you that will get you in less and less trouble, and hopefully no trouble, and then you can move on to higher levels of existence in general. Because there's very, very, the higher understandings that are in the third level of the guild are just comprehensions that are just way beyond the understanding of the average person of what to do that. Now, you have to change. You have to change the way you think and let consciousness take it over. And there are techniques of doing this. And one technique that is common that we tell everybody, of course, is the reverse thinking technique. The minute something comes into your mind, to put the mind in its place, if someone says this is true to you, You automatically don't let the mind would just say, yeah, that's true. I read it on the internet. It's got to be true. Your mind, you tell your consciousness immediately tells your mind the opposite. Oh, this is wrong. This is not true. So whatever it is, you do the opposite of it. And this is a way of confusing the mind and getting it to a stabilized middle position. It allows you then to look at it from the consciousness reality, your higher self, your greater intelligence, so that you can then judge what that is. But nothing is as it appears. There's the physical reality that you see something at. What appears to manifest in your mind from what you understand now is the highest consciousness truth of it all. This is what's really happening. And most people never get to that. And people just have been told the most utter crap that has ever existed on the planet has been put into basic society and considered a fact. And every society has different things they believe, but they've basically been brainwashed to believe that they're not based in anything but a mind-created illusion. And it serves the purpose of feeding the destructive elements that want to control everything. And your goal is to stop that and to stop those elements in general. So there's a lot of people, I guess not, the term isn't people, but there's a lot of energies that and physical realities within your actual brain that are pulling you in many different directions. And the first step is to take control of that by learning how to program your mind. If you let your mind just keep telling you things over and over again and keep feeding your program bank, keep putting in your memory, in your computer, garbage all the time, you're ultimately going to get to a point where all that it ever puts out is garbage. So you need to go in there and you need to run a virus program, so to speak, that blocks viruses. That's a good way to do it because we now live in another world. Using old world stupid terminology shouldn't be anything that anybody really even understands anymore. And there's nothing intelligent or smart about that or cool. The bottom line is that we all know about computer viruses, pop-ups, Trojans. I mean, these are all great. What's very interesting is those are very, very similar, almost identical, of what is in your physical brain. The mind is allowing all this shit through. The mind allows in Trojans. They allow in viruses. Your mind works like a pop-up because basically you go to one place, you're looking at something, and then boom, 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 all these pop-ups come. They're all telling you information. And if just having to click them off all the time distracts you from your actual goal. And that's exactly what's happening with your mind when you go and try and make a decision on anything or study anything, is that your mind keeps throwing these pop-ups at you. Boom, boom, boom. And you're not really getting the full understanding of what's happening. And between all that stuff, what's also happening is you're getting implanted with viruses. You're also getting implanted with Trojans. These are things that sit in your mind, slowly taking it over and slowly blocking you from your higher sense, your consciousness. And this is what happens over your lifetime. So basically, how do you change all this once you understand that fact? And I'm not sure if people understand this. There are really, the most common thing when you get people who can regurgitate what you've told them is they tell you what you said in the physical words by repeating them back. Very much typical Illuminati school teaching. Tell me what it means. Okay. Well, it means this. Oh, you seem to understand it. Well, the point is you don't really understand it. You've repeated back knowledge which you don't really comprehend. Then the other ones who just don't comprehend, period, because they're not paying attention, because they're too busy thinking about pizza, beer, and porn, because that's what the mind told them to do while you were listening to this. The third person basically gets it, but needs to think about it. It needs to get in their consciousness. They need to turn it over to their higher self so they fully understand it. That's what an occult scientist is, and that's the kind of thinking you need to develop. I've ran into countless people that regurgitate information back there. Yeah, I got it. I know it. One guy said, yeah, does that make me high in your organization? I got it. Yeah, this is what it means. No, I said that makes you the lowest in my organization. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even get you in the organization because all you did was mouth back words that means absolutely nothing because not only don't you believe it and understand it, you basically have disregarded it, which makes you a danger. And of course, this person actually was a danger and was trying to infiltrate the organization. So there's people in it. And the people that are too scattered never seem to get their shit together and go, I can't read, I can't meditate, can't do nothing. I want to draw in the corner. You know. And they all seem to have the same story. I'm going to be rich someday. Daddy's going to die and leave me money. Well, that's great. You'll probably be 60, 70 by then, and you can enjoy your life with money, if you ever get it. But, you know, it amazes me, these types of mentalities out there. And occultists tend to be even worse than that because they're very scattered, undirected people. And it's going to be harder for metaphysically based type people to achieve or do anything because of their reality. So there's very few people that really can go past these other stages and become a master occult scientist. It's a very rare state of consciousness to be in. So it doesn't matter if you understand and regurgitate back information. Does it become part of you, and does it activate your higher consciousness? Because that's what all information and knowledge is about. I should say what knowledge is about. Information is just information. Knowledge is supposed to be used to trigger your inner magical being. When you read something, it's not about learning that particular technique per se. That technique is supposed to trigger these elements in you. So it's very important to understand this entire lecture here that you should listen to many, many times to understand the processes going here, because you're judging everything from the common school teachings. Well, you learn something by reading a book and regurgitating it back. That's what society teaches you. And of course, that is needed on a certain level, and it's needed in common fields. But all masters of anything, even the common field master doctors, master lawyers, are not following books per se. They're following the concept in the books. Yeah, you got to know how to do the technical stuff to start off with, and you have to do that in occult sciences. You got to know how to use this formula. You got to know how to do this particular mind practice. That is important, but that is only the beginning. If you stay there, nothing happens. You're just going to be a technocrat, empowered person. And that's going to be a very low level empowerment. Most people don't want that. Most people want very high levels of empowerment that go far beyond basic empowerments to assist them in life and do other things. People want more than that. But it doesn't come to someone who thinks like they've just come out of any school, and that could be the best school in the world. You could come out of Harvard and be the dumbest motherfucker in the world. And most people that graduate from these schools are. Generally, the higher educated you are in these schools, the more programmed you are, and it basically makes you stupider. Because all you do know is book knowledge, and that book knowledge you then make your life turn into. Because whatever you said in the books, you make sure your life formulates into that. And it may have no validity whatsoever, but you're going to make it happen because you've been told it's real. So this is the vicious circle that goes on in the consciousness and understanding of society in general. So they keep doing the same negative things over and over again so that they reaffirm what they've been told, and that makes them part of the system and keeps them under control. Now, past that, there's all sorts of things going on, as we mentioned, that there is actual physical controls within your mind, and there are other spiritual controls that are going on as well that are built into your consciousness in this particular reality. And we believe this is happening all over the universe by a negative destructive force that is controlling the species of the universe. But that's for another discussion as well. But you need to start working out of your consciousness and controlling that out of control mind as best you can. And the reason why it takes people lifetimes and living in monasteries and everything else to get these ultimate controls is because of these other factors I've mentioned who are in there, who are physically doing things and creating chemicals and things within your brain that control you. And the only way to get past these in most people's minds, that's not true, is through this either highly fanatical spiritual dedication or giving into it. But there are other ways. That's the old primitive way. That's not the occult scientist way. There are ways of controlling these, and there are ways of doing this through the use of numerous tools, sigils, and practices, which can eliminate these destructive physical and spiritual energies within you. But these are very advanced teachings and very advanced practices. And some of this is available to apprentices to the public, but it's extremely advanced, and it's not something that we necessarily want to give to anyone out there because of the until they have learned properly how to handle their empowerments for their own personal sake and for society in general. So as I said, you have to, your original stage is to kick your consciousness in, is that it has to be very active. And that is done through the Practices in Psychic Sexual Command book, where you reprogram your consciousness, you use the sigils, and it's going to take time. And it's dedication and where you want to go. Nothing is instantaneous, even though when you use all these systems, you are getting instantaneous results. The minute you view them, the minute you go on the path, you're being empowered, you're being connected to the stream of empowerments, and your life starts to change. It doesn't matter how so-called, and a lot of it is so-called minor in your life. I don't think it's minor at all when things start to change in your life, when you start to be empowered, even on small levels. But you can't expect to have years and years of negative practices, years and years of problems, years and years of being addicted to whatever. You don't go, if I gave you the greatest weight loss secret in the world and you were 400 pounds, you're not going to be skinny tomorrow. Well, I got the secret. Yeah, it works. But how come I ain't skinny? Well, the point is, you've got to lose 300 pounds, and that isn't going to be pulled off of you like some bad sci-fi movie or some comic book. You have to lose the weight by understanding you found the secret and you're transforming your life, you're transforming your body into where it should be. That's the same thing with all knowledge. Knowledge does not go in and, first of all, you have to distinguish knowledge. You have to get information, you have to change that into wisdom, you have to take it into you, you have to make it happen. It evolves you. It can't instantaneous because you can't not handle that. And I don't know why people think that they can. It's amusing how people think that if they turn into a superhero tomorrow, that they would be able to mentally handle that. The nice thing about Marvel comics is that their heroes were very human-like. They had problems. Spider-Man had problems. They had relationship problems. That's what made them human and interesting, instead of this somehow perfect individual that makes all right. So that's what made them so interesting. And if you were to get these kind of things, you'd have all sorts of problems. And it happens so often today. We see this with the creation of wealth, is that everybody wants to be rich. And when people get rich, they get very self-destructive. Rich and famous. Everybody wants to be rich and famous. Whether you admit it or not, everybody does to some degree. And that is until you have it, and then you find out that it ain't all as peaches and roses. There's always baggage with that. And with the amount of people that commit suicide who are wealthy, which is very common. I mean, a lot of wealthy towns and neighborhoods have some of the highest suicide rates. And some of this, of course, is the fear maybe of losing that money. Maybe something happened that they lost money. But a lot of it is the fact of the emptiness that, hey, it don't work. I now have everything and I'm just as miserable, in some extents more miserable, because you always kept that dream alive. Well, if I'm rich, I'm going to be really happy. And when people find out that isn't the case, then they have run into problems. Why is it that all the rich people are taking drugs? You know, I've always been amazed at that. Yeah, they have the money, they can easily afford all these narcotics, but why would you want it to begin with? Isn't life good in general? Well, obviously not. Obviously, all that money has to be taken and spent on something else to make you feel better that the money didn't. So this is a very common problem with the realities created out there. So you cannot go from Joe Idiot to Joe Super Conscious and be able to psychologically have the process. You have to evolve. That's why we always state that the occult sciences is a lifestyle. You're evolving, and that's just the nature of this unfortunate human existence. And one of the biggest problems, of course, is how short basic human life is now, particularly quality of life. Regardless of how people are living longer now, how many of these people are living longer in a higher consciousness state, in a functional state, and not only just physically functional, but mentally functional. I believe Ronald Reagan lived to be 92 or 90, whatever it was. I'm not really sure what that is. But the last 15 years of his life, he was a vegetable with Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's takes everything from you. You're basically dead. There's nothing left. If you don't have a memory, you don't remember anything in your life, you have nothing. And you can't even function properly on any level. You don't even understand to go to the bathroom. You shit on yourself. Can't be anything worse than that. So the point is, you're not alive. So the point is that you have this certain time element where you have to take control of your life and you have to make it alive. That doesn't mean you make addiction in everything you function. There certainly is time for everything in life. Time for hobbies, times for enjoyments. If you want to do whatever that may be, there's certainly times for that. Whether it's watching TV, going to sporting events, whatever it is. The difference is that you spend your whole life around a bar watching some sport event. That's just a mind-fucking addiction, which is keeping you from progressing. Your lower mind is telling you what to do because it likes that null environment that where it produces certain chemicals to feed the parasites within your mind. So it's like anything in life. It's always considered the best path is what the ancient Greek called the golden means, which is this medium, perfect road to go that balances life. But you always have to keep in mind, no matter what you're doing, that you have this lifestyle and that you need to take care of that. And that's what you're doing. And there are very exciting, interesting things that come from this, and you should have a passion for it, and a passion for the organization that is guiding you on this amazing journey. But instant anything don't happen. And that's because of the fact of what's happening in your entire mind consciously, that you're blocking your higher consciousness. Your mind is out of control and telling you this. And there are the self-destructive programming you've put in there, which is dramatically aided by direct spiritual and physical forces that are controlling your mind. Shockingly so. So you have to activate and free your mind, as the great quote from The Matrix is. What you're really saying is free your consciousness. The mind is already out of control and being controlled. And never will be. You have to free your consciousness to control, to put a collar on your mind and tell it what to do. It's just as simple as that. And that's what all the training's about. That's what all the procedures are about. And we have this step-by-step program. We also have the step-by-step occult mastery agenda, which gets you going towards your practical goal right away, because life is about manifestation. Life is about making things happen now and not going through this lifestyle process to get some. You need to move to your goals right now. But you got to understand that that's just a baby step, and you have to develop these things to get onto it. So we give both of that so people can move ahead right now. And move ahead to create your own reality. Now, it's very important that you understand that there is no reality. The reality is created by the magician, who forms it into his vision. And that's the reality. Not until the magician has created the reality is it real. So with that, I will leave you. And as I always say, question everything, believe nothing, and let the guild be your guide.